No.
Woohoo! It works!
There you are.
Yeah! How about that countdown, eh?
Pretty
Cheers. It's
exciting.
very exciting.
Cheers!
I feel like we're
Cheers to
well
you.
started.
Cheers to everyone. It is 5 o'clock right now, Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. This is a special edition of Cellar Confidential, and tonight we are hosting Sherry Karlo and Saxe Brickenden, both from Karlo Estate Winery from Prince Edward County, Ontario. Guys, good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
Fantastic.
We are fantastic and so honored to be here. Thank you so much for asking us to join you, Carl. It's really great. It's exciting.
And you know what? I am so thrilled. And I know that my better half was so sad that she couldn't be there because she wanted to be part of that. She loved the stories, she loves the wine. And I know that our members wanted to know more about you guys. And I wanted to talk more about the wines as well because I feel the way that our weekly feature fell, there was a long weekend into that. I felt I didn't have time to talk about the wine enough. I just wanted to know a little bit more. And obviously, I would like to chat with you about a little bit of how Karlo Estate was founded, how Saxe come on board with his wealth of business knowledge, and what he was, and what where is love for wine. I know, I love it. I just wish my wife was there too, right? But where is love for wine? Because I know that Saxe has a love for Bordeaux wine, and it shows when I drink the Quintus, and I feel like there's some Bordeaux thing behind that. But I also want to talk about Derek, the winemaker. So we have a lot to cover for the next hours. I'm just happy to have you around here. Let's start with about how, like, which kind of a day did you have today? Is it rainy outside? Is it cold? You know, October is such a critical month when we're talking about winemaking and about how to run a winery. October is very critical because it's harvest time.
Mhm.
So how was today? It's the 21st of October. How was the 21st of October in Prince Edward County today?
Little sprinkles,
Yeah.
11 degrees, the high. It's right now about 8.
A little
we,
bit of wind.
we were so lucky to get our fruit in when we did. Let's just put
Yes.
it that way. We're lucky because over the years we built up a small army that we can call upon. And when Derek says, "Yep, I like the phenolic ripeness on this," now, okay, go. I don't,
It,
it used
and
to
it
be.
is really like a go time. Like you look
Yeah.
at the forecast, like winemaker, like you mentioned, Sax winemaker taste it, couple
Yep.
clicks with the little machine and the
Yeah.
sugar level, the phenolic ripeness, and it's a go time. It's go time
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we experience a shortage of labor across the country. How do you guys fare out there? Like, is it
Well,
a
first of
stuff?
all, I want to give a shout out. I mean, we got the dynamic duo. We got Derek Barnett, and of course, he's been named Wine Person of the Year by the National Capital Sommelier Guild, and he's been named Wine Maker of the Year by Tony Forbes. I mean, the guy's a rock
Tony
star.
Aspler.
Tony Aspler.
Tony
sorry.
Forbes was the
Yeah,
rock star.
sorry.
He was
so
here the
he
other
was
night.
he was on the stage.
Yeah,
here.
he was on the stage.
Anyway, Tony
There's
Aspler.
so many awards about Derek this year to remember. You should
Oh.
have a notepad.
Well, we've got 23 gold medals this year alone, so but we won't get into that. Gold medal scores are piling up, and we're really grateful. But there's Rick Jasenko. He's the guy that manages the vineyard, and Rick has been working his derriere off to do what we were able to pull off. But yeah, you're right. When Derek's the guy tasting the grapes. The yin and yang of Derek and Spencer is really powerful because Spencer's super more the science. He's the numbers, and then Derek is the palate. And boy, we've got just a great team this year, and I hope it's going to show in the vintage. It's certainly showing in the 2018 vintage, that even between 2018, 19, and 2020 vintage. Our bubble was a 2020, but generally it's been the 18 vintage in the reds that we've been enjoying, and you've been opening up tonight. We're super excited about everything that's happened really in the last few years. It's been an amazing transformation, right, Sherry?
So we're seeing now, so a little 11 degrees. It's misty. It was go time. The fruit are coming in. All the fruit are all in right now, and it's like
Yeah.
now it's crushed.
Now it's
now we're
crushed
into
stem.
fermenting, punch downs, and little skin contact for this or that. But generally, we're making wine.
Yeah.
So in order in Prince Edward County, if we go in order, you guys will go if what you guys are working with. What is the first grape to bring in until the last one? Let's say today and yesterday. What's the order of a varietal that you guys are bringing in?
Well, the first one to come in was the Marquette, which kind of sort of makes sense. It's a hybrid. It's a little more advanced. So we brought in our Marquette first. Then we brought in our Chard and our Pinot Noir. Then we brought in our other several other hybrids, Frontenac Noir, all our Frontenac Gris, Frontenac Blanc,
The Petit Pearl.
Petit Pearl.
But we also at that time brought in the Malbec and the Carmenere.
Was the next one.
But it changes year to year because sometimes it really kind of, I don't know, it's not always exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
I know like some years we've had fruit hanging till November, like things like Cab Franc or Frontenac Noir. But
this year was really about a week and a half early. Everything seemed about a week and a half early. We had a good season, so we weren't desperate. There's always that balancing. Do you let the fruit hang longer because you pick up a little bit more character, ripeness, or but you might have pressure from birds, and we don't have raccoons. Luckily, we don't have that issue, but we did have the bird bangers going in the last few days. Yep.
I've noticed a shift. It seems like in the last few years, a lot of people talk to us about climate change and how has that affected. And it feels like the entire calendar has shifted like 2 weeks to a month. So like the extremes are more intense, but they're shorter. Like winter here, like hardcore winter is basically 3 weeks, if 2 weeks, like February and then by March, winter's over. It's weird, but it's freaking cold when it is winter. Like it's like no
January,
kidding around.
February.
It's winter for about a week and a half. Like it's like, oh my God.
I just love the
why
snowbanks.
are we here?
Because we're on an island out here, right? The Prince Edward County is an island, so you're out on the water, and when the wind's up, oh my goodness, you look out the window and you go,
Yeah.
no.
It reminds me. I'm born and raised in Chicoutimi, all the way up north Quebec. Yeah. And we're known to be like the place for snowmobile. The European, when they're coming in Quebec in the winter, it was to snowmobile. It's a snow hole up there. Yeah. I remember I was born in 76, so grew up for me, early 80s. By Christmas, you couldn't see across the window because the snowbank were 8 feet high. We don't see that anymore. And when we're talking about extreme, I think, guys, you're bang on. And it's a real thing. It's not just it's not a legend anymore. It's a real thing. And I think the summer extreme, we had I know for us in Western Canada, we had the prime example of summer extreme this summer. Mm-hmm. I know that you guys had a great summer in terms of length, in terms of intensity. Did you guys experience that heat wave as much as we experienced it here in Western Canada?
I don't think so. I think we did have like about a week and a half, 2 weeks again of extreme heat. But I mean, I remember, the uniform at Karlo Estates changed for about 2 weeks because it was a little bit less because it was like walking around in a sauna, but it only lasted for 2 weeks. So yeah, everything feels like it's shifted 2 weeks to a month, and it's like it goes from summer to winter, and there's very short in between seasons now, and then there's intense.
And when you say, Sherry, it's very interesting. When you see it shift for a week or two, is it longer or shorter? Because I think like you guys used to leave the grapes in the vines for a little longer to have more. Okay, so now you have to pick early because summer is because the fall is barely non-existent. If I understand correctly, right?
No. Well, it seems longer. Like it's actually weird. A lot of people are commenting on how warm it is in October, and they're still harvesting things out of their gardens, and they're still swimming, and and they can't believe how long the summer is into the fall. But then the fall goes from fall to winter very quickly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
summer is very, very long, and the winter feels forever. But I don't know if that's just psychological. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but the seasons, the in between, like there's extremes in the middle of those two major seasons, and then the shoulder seasons are shorter. So it goes from the extremes faster.
We have a secret advantage, and that is Sherry's late husband, Richard Karlo, because he tile drained our vineyards. So, when you get these extremes of heavy rains and stuff, it drains into Hubs Creek, and we don't have the disease pressure that everybody else has that didn't take that extra step of putting in tiles underneath, about 3 feet down, 3.5 feet down, so that the soil dries out quickly, and you don't have downy mildew, powdery mildew, all those horrible things in the extremes that many of other wineries have had to cope with. And that's not luck. That's Richard thinking ahead.
Yeah.
The other thing we're noticing is thinking ahead too is we're seeing that we're able to ripen more hotter climate grape varietals. Like a lot of people thought we were nuts for planting the Malbec. Other winemakers were teasing, saying, "What are you going to do? Put like mirrors in the vineyard and ripen it?" Like what? But we took a gamble, and it turns out it paid off because in Niagara, they seem to crop at about 5 or even higher tons per acre. Whereas in the county, it's like, if you get 2.5 tons, you're like super lucky. If you get 2 tons, you're pretty good. If it's usually a little less than that. But it's a good thing from a winemaking standpoint because the terroir drops the fruit. There is no verjus in the county because there's nothing to drop. The terroir does it for us.
Quality, quantity.
So we get a less but higher quality, the more concentration of flavors, the typical thing. But we're really amazed with the Malbec. Like we're getting amazing. It's very prolific and it's ripening really, really well.
It loves it here. Basically, we're right on the 44th parallel. And if you take the 44th parallel across through Europe, it goes right through Bordeaux, right through Cahors. Cahors is the birthplace of Malbec. It's not born down.
That's right. So it makes sense. It does make sense.
That's Richard.
And so while you lead me somewhere that I wanted to touch base the beginning of Karlo. I think we are already attached with the whole story of how everything started. Sherry, can you please lead us to that day when you were having a drive looking for a vineyard and when you stopped somewhere and I would like to hear after reading it many times and having Mira telling me the story over and again, and when she's crying every time she talks about it. Aww. And can you please tell us about how did you find the place where you guys are located now, how that everything happened?
Well, it all started with Lava Life. And that was because
I love that first sentence. I like how it starts. Once upon a time.
There was an online dating. And my girlfriends, I told my girlfriends I wasn't good at dating guys. I was always picking the bad boys. So they made me a deal and they said, look, we're going to tell you what to do, but you got to listen to us or else. And they said, the first thing is you're going to write down all your interests. So because I was working with wine in the advertising industry, because my clients were involved with wine, Altamira used to do fund management dinners at Roy York. So we'd invite Hugh Johnson to come up and speak about wine. And I had to art direct all the different tables to look like different wine regions. So I learned a lot about the lore of wine, like the topography and the labels and what they mean and the etchings. And I just fell in love as an art director with the labels. And then, of course, opened them up and found there's something really beautiful inside. So I had wine as an interest. And the deal was I wasn't allowed to smile at anyone unless I could check off every single interest that was on my list, on their list, no matter how cute they were. So after about 8 months, I had about 3 good smiles, and and I met one fellow, and then I met another fellow who was Richard, and then I told the third fellow about Richard courting me by asking me if I'd like to go out to Prince Edward County to help him look for vineyard land. I mean, what's a girl to do? So that's how he would bring me out for dates to look at property. And when I met him, he was an amateur winemaker. He was part of the Pickering Wine Guild of Canada, the Pickering Wine Guild. Yep. And he was living in a 4-bedroom home in the woods in Ajax. And when he finally had me come over to see his house, It was like walking into a cellar with a 4-poster bed. Again, what's a girl to do? But basically, because my love was marketing and his love was making wine, we were like, okay, we got to start selling this stuff because this is getting out of hand. It was always good to be his friend because he always had too much wine. So finally, we basically spent about a third of the budget that he had saved over years of working as a partner in a engineering firm for the automotive industry, on B&Bs and 5-star restaurants. And we would go to every single winemaker in the county and we would ask them, where do you think we should buy land? And they gave us a really explicit, opinions about, very passionate opinions about where we should be planting. Like some people said, if you were under this highway, like forget it, like you might as well just pack up and go home now. And others were wanting to be certain places. So from that, we were able to take all that research and come up with our own theory. So what we realized is we wanted to be about 1.5 miles from the lake, so we get the moderating effects of the lake, but without the wind burn. We wanted to have the famous Hillier limestone soil. We wanted to have a water feature running through the land, and of course the south-facing slopes. And we wanted to have the proximity to Toronto because we were both coming from Toronto, so that was a factor. And we saw that there was a lot of wineries kind of popping up in the Hillier region. And then, of course, Richard had to throw a wrench into the plan because he was a civil engineer by education. He had a love of buildings. So he wanted to have a hip barn, which is a traditional 1805 post and beam barn that has that little
in the roof
jet out on the roof.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it took us about 1.5 years of driving around. We had a real estate agent helping us. And finally, it just happened that we were driving around the back roads ourselves, which is what we would do on our dates. We just go drive around the county looking for vineyard land. And finally, we came across a barn that had a for sale sign on it. So he was like, slam on the brakes. He's like, what? Let's go in here. So he went in and pulled into the yard, and he's looking around, and it was dilapidated. It looked like it was about to fall down. And it looked like kind of like a ghost town of a farm. And he said, this is great. Let's go talk to the real estate agent and find out about this. So he backed up, and as he did, he backed into the fence post, and there was a spike sticking out of the fence post, and it ripped a hole right into his SUV tire. So it ripped the tire pretty much right off. So after we called CAA and said, can you come and help us? And they're like, where are you? And they're like, well, okay, it's going to take us about 1.5 hours to get there. That was exactly the right time that we needed to go over and knock on the owner's door. And we met Joe Stevenson, the grandson of the original builder of the barn. And he took us out and took us on a tour of the land right then and there. And we realized it was about 100 acres. It was south-facing slopes. It was the Hillier limestone soil. It had Hubs Creek running through the vineyard, and it had a hip barn. So we're like, oh my God, this is it. And on top of it all, we went across the street and we met Batista, who owns Hubs Creek. And I went up to him just because of, growing up in downtown Toronto, you become very multicultural. So I just went up to him and I gave him a kiss on each cheek because you could tell he was Italian. And so he was like, oh, Bella, like he just, so we were like, this is just too weird. So we were really happy. We took a picture to commemorate it. It was like American Gothic, where we're standing in front of our wagon where our wheel fell off. And we're like, okay, this is where we're going to make our homestead, and to commemorate the moment. And then we started bidding on it. And at first we thought that we lost the property because somebody else outbid us and they got the property. And it was like the worst winter ever because we were so depressed because it was the perfect property and it was very hard to let go, and be like, we didn't get it. Okay, we're going to start again, looking again. But then
there's only one of them. That's for sure.
That's
right?
We're like, it was a really depressing winter. But then I came in the spring, and it's a horrible thing, but their financing fell through. So good for us. Their deal didn't work out. It didn't close. So after 27 signbacks, we finally negotiated the deal because Richard was a master negotiator, and we got the property. So it was really exciting. And I just remember it was like he handed me a pitchfork and I've been stuck here ever since, basically. So we bought the land in 2005. We started planting in 2006. We did our first vintage in 08, and then we opened the doors to the public on May 22nd of 2010. And because Richard was one of only 52 wine judges in Canada, he had a really clear vision on what he wanted to plant in the vineyard to make the kind of wines that he wanted to drink. Like, he was a big Bordeaux lover. So we have probably the largest portfolio of big full-bodied reds in the county, I would say. So we hit the ground running. At the time, being that my background was advertising, I knew we couldn't afford any because Richard was supposed to be my sugar daddy. But after buying a winery, he was just Pope. So luckily, my 16-year-old daughter introduced me to this concept called Facebook. And because all her high school friends were joining Facebook, and she's like, because I was like, I got to like network and just do word of mouth. And she said, well, Mom, if you join Facebook, you could tell 2 friends, and then they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. And so I did. And I started thinking about every single person I could remember. And of course, I remembered like some of the people that I met through Lavalife. And of course, I remembered a certain person. But anyway, so I got everybody on Facebook, and I met everybody that I could. And I quickly got up to like 5,000 people on Facebook, because as being in advertising, you don't really make money until like baseball. You have to move around to get your salary to go up. So you meet a lot of people. And then I was also teaching at OCAD. So I'd have like a different crop of students every year. So I knew a lot of people. But so when we hit the ground, we had a lot of people buying our wines right away. And we were able to... I remember our first weeks of being opened. I remember the first time we hit $1,000 in sales. I was like so excited. I was like, "Yay, we did it $1,000!" So I'm like, "I'm gonna do a cartwheel." So I did a cartwheel, and I'm like, and then we hit $2,000 in sales. So then I did 2 cartwheels, and then when we hit $3,000 in sales, I was like, "Okay, I have to call off the cartwheels. I'm getting dizzy." So we were winning awards, and things were going really well. In 2012, Richard won an Entrepreneur of the Year finalist award with Ernst & Young for being profitable within 2 years of opening the winery. And, we were getting some notice, and things were going really well. So unfortunately, there came a time when in 2014, Richard came home in January from a boys' weekend, and he had this cough. And so, of course, it was driving him nuts. So he went to the doctor, and he got 2 different kinds of antibiotics, and they still weren't working. So finally, the doctors said, "Come in and let's just do an X-ray and let's just check out your lungs to see what's going on." And so they did, and he called up again and said, "You know what? I think we might have like had a smudge on the screen or something, because there's a little spot on your lungs. So we just want to do it again, and we just want to do a CAT scan this time to see what's going on." So they did a CAT scan, but this time they did all the way, like they did his entire torso. And they discovered that not only were there a couple of spots in his lungs, but there was a huge lump of a cancerous growth in his colon. And by the time they had discovered it, it had already metastasized throughout his body. So unfortunately, with cancer, there are people who come back from stage 4, so don't get me wrong. You can reverse it with all sorts of good things, but it is a challenge. And for Richard, it was 50% of his liver was already covered in cancer, and that's not a good thing. So they gave him a diagnosis saying that if you do chemo and radiation, your life expectancy is going to be 3 years. So all we can offer you is palliative care. And at that point, Richard thought about it, and he decided that he didn't want to spend his time traveling to Kingston every day of the week for radiation and then feeling nauseous and sick to his stomach the whole time. He decided that he'd rather use his time to teach me how to run the winery. And he used his time to make sure that his mother and my mother were completely set up so that they would be looked after and be a support system for me. So you can only imagine how compelled I feel to make sure that Karlo Estates is successful and that we create something that he's proud of. Because for me, if that doesn't happen, that's just not an option. Because there's no way I will embarrass Richard, and there's no way I will it would just feel like, I know that, starting a business, any business is stressful, but starting a winery, it's like you have every single facet of, from planting to manufacturing to distribution to marketing. It's the whole thing. And the stress of that, I'm sure, contributed to his illness. So I'm not going to let that be in vain. So lucky for me, he did give me lots of good advice. One of the things that I really held on to was, he said to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. And if I just focus on doing that, I would be okay. So that's what I set out to do. And so where do I go from here? So of course, it gets announced on Facebook that Richard died. He died in November of 2014. And it took me until the spring to feel like I wanted to be, out in public, because I felt like this great weight on people going, what's going to happen with Karlo Estates? What's she going to do? And I felt watched, and it was, and I didn't have a lot of time to really focus or dwell on the fact that Richard had died, because I had to buck up and get on with it.
But were you on your own at that point? I mean, like, did you have a support cast around you? Were you?
Well, we certainly had a team. I mean, we had our wine stewards. I had people. I was really lucky. The thing that's really beautiful about Prince Edward County is it's a very collaborative community, and everyone realizes that nobody comes to wine country to go to one winery. So it's very important for my neighbors to succeed, because like Mandavi talks about, you advertise the region first and then your winery. So luckily for me, Richard had such a magnanimous, charismatic personality that he made many, many friends. That Richard had a lot of love for Richard. So there was many people that stepped up to the plate. And I would say for, the first 6 months at least, I had like lots of county winemakers coming in and checking in on me and helping out. And, John Harwood, actually from John Rohde from Harwood Estates, helped me find a traveling winemaker who actually grew up in Belleville, and he happened to be home visiting his family. So Kyle came down and helped us sort out the winery. There was lots of bad things happening because I didn't know what I was doing. And, Richard convalescing was a little bit more important to me. So to make a long story short, we ended up having to throw out the entire 2014 vintage, which the banks didn't like too much. At the time, I was working on a project. With another entity. And so I had some business counsel around. Saxe always teases me that it would have been cheaper for me to go to Harvard for the amount of what the lessons cost me. But luckily for me, in finding all those people on Facebook, the third guy on Lavalife was actually Saxe Brickenden, because he was the third bachelor number 3. And so when I wrote to him and said, yeah, bachelor number 2 is taking me to wine country to look for vineyard land, you said you sat there watching.
I watched the cursor blinking, like Sleepless in Seattle, if you remember that movie. And I said, you got to go with this guy. If he's taking you out to look for land where he wants to plant vines and build a winery, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, Saxe said he wanted to date him.
Yeah.
So Saxe was dating somebody else at the same time. And so we said, you know what, it's kind of starting to get a little complicated. So you do your thing and I'll do my thing. And I thought, you know what, I'm with Richard, but if that's the kind of guy I might like to date, he might be the kind of guy that we'd like to hang out with. So I remembered when I needed to find more names on Facebook to tell 2 friends that he liked wine and that he was a good person, and why not? So I befriended him on Facebook, and I used to tease him because I'd see him with a beautiful woman on his arm and I'd say, hey, how's the main squeeze? And he'd write back and say,
a little squeezing.
So, or he'd break up with somebody and then he'd send me a note and he'd say, hey, how's life treating you? And I'm like, well, I got a rock on my hand, things are looking up. And he'd be like, okay. So about just under a year after Richard died, I put an announcement on Facebook that I was coming into the county or into the city to do my first public appearance. And it just so happened that the location was about a block away from Saxe's loft where he lived in Toronto. So I guess he saw this thing pop up on Facebook announcing that I was going to be in Toronto. And so he figured it was time to come and meet me or something.
Yeah, obviously I was intrigued enough with Sherry that we had stayed in touch for 13 years, but I'd never met her. So I thought it was about time I did. So I went down to, besides it's a wine event, of course I'm going to be there. So I walked in trying to be a cool guy, and I thought, well, I'm not going to walk right over to her booth. I went over to Clausen.
That's not something we do, right? We don't do that way.
No, we got to be cool. I mean, women come to us. We don't go to them.
That's it, right?
So
because we're the boys, right?
Yeah. So I went to Clausen and had a glass of Chardonnay. And as I got closer to Sherry at the end of the room, I went, holy shit, she looks better in person than in the photographs. That never happens, right?
Oh, dear.
And as I got closer, I became like a 16-year-old at the high school dance, asking the girl to dance. I became very self-conscious and nervous and not confident, not my usual self. And I thought, what the heck is wrong with me? But anyway, she was very professionally pouring these 1-ounce pours of fortified Van Alstyne red fortified wine, port style wine. And as she got to me, the only hint that I had that she might be a little verklempt too is that when she got to me, she went glug, 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 glug. She very generous pour. So I said, wow, generous pour. But then I backed away and I realized, look, she lost her husband less than a year ago. She's got her employees there. She's going to be self-conscious too. So we're not going to be chatting now. So I had a little walk outside and I thought, I know, I'm going to go to my favorite chocolatier, Soma, in the distillery district. Soma makes fantastic homemade artisanal chocolates. And I got 8 dark chocolate fleur de sel caramels. Little box would fit in her pocket. Went back to her and said, well, we'll talk later, but this will pair very well with that port style wine that you grossly over poured for me. And then then I had this horrible time waiting. But 2 days later, I got a text, and I won't edit it for your listeners. OMFG, this is like crack. So the chocolate did its job.
Yeah, I said it was the crack cocaine of chocolate.
Yeah. And I said, I can get more,
You got your guy, right?
You got my guy.
I got a guy.
Yeah. So she said, well, I'll only take delivery if it's 2 weeks from now, Saturday night, 7:30 at the Drake Devonshire at the bar. So I thought, okay, that's a date. So she made me drive out to her turf.
Had to follow the old Lava Life rules. If the guy's not willing to come to your own neighborhood, he's not into you enough. So never mind.
Spot on. Spot on. Anyway, I was definitely into her because you can get to know someone a little bit by writing back and forth. But anyway, it's honestly, I didn't look at my my black book. I say black book because actually it was a spreadsheet. But I didn't look at it since I met her. And in fact, the only time I've opened it was to show her the spreadsheet. But anyway, so I fell in love with the redhead and moved out to the county. My background in wine is, studied it kind of voraciously. Got the bug when I was 14 in Paris on a school trip, and then really studied it. I actually got my certificate from the Italian Wine Academy.
Wait a minute, you can't gloss over I fell in love with wine at 14.
I know, I heard that one too, and I wanted to keep it for a little later. How the heck that happened?
Okay, here's how that happened.
Fell in love with love at 14.
So Karl, you understand that in Quebec the culture is there's always wine on the dinner table, right?
Yes, absolutely.
My parents were really true tête carré. They were the martini crowd, right? So it was all, darling, let's have a martini before dinner. So so they didn't really pay much attention to wine. So honestly, they would have Blue Nun, Black Tower, sweet, horrible headache, instant headaches. I would taste it, and 5-10 minutes later, I'd have a headache. So I thought, this is horrible stuff. So I didn't think I liked wine, but I was offered it because my parents were pretty liberal. And then I went at age 14 on a school trip, and I loved Paris, so much so that I convinced my parents before the age of the cell phone to let me call from a payphone in Paris every 2 days and check in and say I'm still alive. And I stayed there on my own money that I had saved up doing hi-fi stereo installations in Quebec, in Montreal. And
I love it. Oh my God, I love it.
I mean, don't think I would have let my own sons do that, although they're amazing guys. I look at it in the fullness of time and realize how trusting they were. Anyway, so I stayed in this little rooming house, and the woman that owned it, Madame Paradis, she looked at me and said, "You're very young. Where are your parents?" And so eventually I told her the story, and she said, "Oh, you must come for dinner. You must have some true French food." So she made me a fantastic dinner. She was a widow, and I was probably bored. Anyway, so, and I looked older, by the way. I did have a little bit of a beard. Anyway, so she said, "Do you like wine?" And I said, "Oh, not really. No, I'm not really into wine." She went, "You don't like wine?" Like it's a challenge, right? So she goes into her late husband's wine cellar and pulls out a 1966 Grand Chaiseau. And because she had it, and she thought, he doesn't like wine. He doesn't like wine.
I'll show you some wine.
She uncorked this, and I mean, the fruit on it just filled the room. The bouquet was amazing. And I went, "Oh, this does smell good." And I was done after that. I went home, 2 weeks later to my parents, the worst wine snob imaginable, because when you're 14, you know everything, right?
Nice.
And then I studied. I got Jean Lenoir's Le Nez de Vin, the little 50 vials with different essences. I read Hugh Johnson. I read a lot of Robert Parker, because I do like, big Bordeaux style wines. And then I moved to Santa Rosa at Ground Zero in Sonoma Valley when I managed to skip 2 years by going from Quebec to Ontario. So I skipped 2 years of CEGEP. I took Q year at Carleton University, and then I was taking first year courses anyway. So anyway, they let me skip another year. So I ended up at 19 graduating and going to California. Fantastic. So I don't want to talk about me anymore, but let's just say that every time I would travel through the eyes of a wine lover. Whatever country I was in the wine region. And I would experience the culture through wine. And
okay, Saxe, I have to stop you right here, because you're the only person on this freaking planet who the first decent bottle of wine he has was 66 a Grand Chaiseau. Okay, do you know that doesn't really happen outside of a freaking movie, right?
Yeah. No. But I got so passionate about it. I got all my relatives kind of excited about it, especially my godfather. And he had me look after his wine cellar. And he lived in Ottawa, but we built a really amazing cellar for him. So I got to buy wines and taste them with him, and I had a fantastic experience with that. Anyway.
Wow. Okay. So 66 Chaiseau. It's like I'm gonna go to bed tonight. Absolutely puzzled about that story. This is amazing, awesome. Now that we're talking about the beginning. Now we're sitting here, 2021. You have, let's say, what you started in 2008, the first vintage. So you're like 14 vintages in. The portfolio obviously has progressed, has matured. Your vines obviously now are mature vines. You're producing as an adult vines level. So you have mature vines. How many cases a year that your estate produce?
So we're just counting it up for this particular harvest right now. But last year, we have 7,200 cases in production. We've increased production this year because we've made a few new wines that have been extremely popular. So I don't like to disappoint people. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I never like to disappoint anyone. So when we sell out, I don't like that. So for example, our 2020 bubble has been extremely successful for us.
And extremely good too, I have to say. Really, really good. Oh my God.
I never put pressure on people to buy the bubble, because I will happily drink it all myself. I'm like, you don't need to buy this. It's okay. I'll just drink it. But we only made 4,000 liters this year because it was our first trial. We were, testing it. But I mean, Saxe can talk more about that and how what we thought it was going to be and what it ended up being.
Well, even the rock star Derek Barnett had not had a lot of experience with sparkling wine. So really it was, one of his first. and it was our first. And so you know what it's like when it's a bit of a different business, and when you haven't had a lot of experience with it, I thought, you know what it's going to be like. I called it the sacrificial pancake. You know, when you and the pan's not quite the right temperature yet, and you know you kind of burn the outside, and then the middle's not done yet, and you think, yeah, I'm not going to serve that to any friends. I'll have that one myself. And so we thought it was going to be the sacrificial pancake, but at least we get in the game. And then we had barely a week to enter it in the All Canadian Wine Championships, and it won a gold medal in the category of sparkling wine.
Yeah.
So surprise, gold medal. It's first vintage. So
not bad for a sacrificial pancake, right?
Yeah.
I guess when you put real maple syrup on it, it tastes pretty darn good or something.
So Derek Barnett is the real maple syrup, like what?
Yeah, something like that. Or the vines are the real maple syrup, I would say in that story, because I would say the vines. What is the proportion? Because you guys bring some grapes from Niagara. What's the proportion? Is it a 75-25 bringing from Niagara or 50-50? Depending on the vintage?
It varies, obviously, on the vintage. It varies also on what Derek's doing. But if you look at, for example, our Patio Reserve Rosé, he decided that really the backbone he wanted for it was, in its, last year, was Semillon, and that most of it was Semillon. And then he blended in our estate-grown Malbec, and wow, is it strawberries and just wonderful things going on with it. And it's $20 a bottle. So most of the wine in that bottle is actually Niagara, but we've got the only Malbec in the county. And did it ever change the character of that wine? So it really depends on what Derek feels is the right varietal to blend, and he is a master at blending. So we just don't get in the way of that. We don't even do bench trials most of the time with him. He just humors us to make us think we're in some control. But the reality is we don't get in the way of the artist anymore, because 23 gold medal scores. I mean, last year was 18. The year before that, 2 years before that, it was 8 gold medals. And I'm strutting around like a peacock going, 8 gold medals, baby. Well, now at 23, we're just going, okay, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do is fine with us. So
because I was traveling in the region. I would say early September. I was in Niagara, and a couple times I went to a hotel and like a nice wine bar, and a couple times I'm just sitting there talking with people, and the name of Derek Barnett comes back up, and the third time in 2 days I'm like, oh my God, he is a legend here.
He really is a legend.
He's absolutely. I was talking to Fred DePorfio. Fred has been anyway. So when Fred is like, "What? You don't know the legend of Derek Barnett?" He is like, even like other winemaker look at him as a monument. So you guys, how long Derek has been with you guys?
Well, he joined us in 2015. This was shortly after meeting Sherry. I won't say how shortly. We were at my sister's cottage, and I was reading one of my favorite wine blogs, and I jumped up out of the chair and actually startled her. And I said, Derek Barnett, because I had just read that he had sold his interest in Lely down in Niagara to foreign interests, and that Chinese interests. And so, big corporation, it's a bit of a different dynamic. And so I thought, Derek, we should call Derek. And I said to Sherry, Derek Barnett. And she said, well, yeah, I know Derek Barnett. Of course, I know Derek Barnett. And I said, well, he should be the winemaker. And she said, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. That he knew Richard, and they used to commiserate over things when
they used to get drunk together in the wine cellars at the Brook Street Hotel after the Lumiere Festival. Yeah. It was always in January, so I was usually on a cleanse, so I'd be exhausted after the show, and I'd just go up to the room at the hotel. But the Somme of the Brook Street Hotel would invite all of the winemakers who were there for the Lumiere Festival down into the wine cellar, and he'd say, to thank you guys, I just want you to open up whatever you want to open up.
That's fun.
So of course they're there till 4 a.m. drinking Dom Perignon and all this all these other crazy things. And I mean, that's one of the only times I'd ever seen Richard drunk was. And we missed breakfast, and But anyway, he met Derek Barnett, and they realized that they both had a very similar philosophy to winemaking. They were both very non-interventionalist winemakers. They were both winemakers of the palate, not the numbers. They were both very much into the old world way of making wine, to leave all those acids and tannins in place so it has the bones to lay down for 20, 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And a love for proper corks, but also having made wine so long on both their fronts that they were at the point where they were just wanting to experiment. It kind of reminds me of like classically trained artists. They learn how to paint properly, like Picasso. If you look at his stuff that he did when he was in school, he knew how to paint. Yeah. But then they start going all over the place afterwards. Like they start experimenting. So Derek was the first to use Canadian oak to age Chardonnay. So he's a bit of a legend for that, but he's also, he's so generous and so humble and so gracious. He just has donated a lot of his time and knowledge to helping the next generation of winemakers. He was very like-minded with Richard like that. Richard was always generous with his time, and he'd always be on the phone talking to somebody about what to do. So they were very like-minded. So when I did call Derek and I said, so I hear you're not making wine anymore. And I had a question, which is, when a winemaker stops making wine, can you really stop them from making any wine? I was like,
how about you ask me exactly what you want, Sherry?
Yeah, and I just wanted to know if you might be interested in talking to me about making wine for Karlo, because you and Richard were, your philosophy, your approach is so similar. And he said, I don't really like to discuss business over the phone. So he said, I'll come to the county next week and we'll talk in person. I'm like, okay. So when he arrived, in the time it took him to get out of his car and for us to walk from the first parking lot down to the bridge, which is less than a 3-minute walk, we had a deal and we shook hands, and we've been making wine together ever since. He's been making the wine. I've been helping to sell it. That's all.
Wow.
But an amazing team. And there was that question mark over the winery after Richard died that, okay, they made amazing wine before, but now? So to have the credibility of Derek at that time, frankly, I think it's taken 3 men, maybe 4, to an attempt to replace Richard, and no one can ever replace him. But 4 of us working as hard as we can have done okay. And certainly Derek has to get a lot of the credit, if not being the thing that happened to us in 2015 that allowed us to get back on course and recover and impress the bank.
Yeah, and I also, because I'm a big hockey fan, right? And when I'm reading about the story, and I came across like Doug Gilmour name couple times, and I was like, wow, there's a hockey story like that. But I more understand after talking to people, it's Gilmour wanted to make his own line of wine, and he reached out to you guys to do it for him, right?
Yeah, he was actually was based.
That's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, he was based in Kingston for a while. So he went to Aquaterra, which is one of the top restaurants in Kingston. And he tried our Quintus at the restaurant. And he was interested in making wine because Doug is a big wine lover himself. Okay. So he thought that would be a good idea. And he tasted our wine at the restaurant and he said, wow, this is delicious. I want these people to make my wine. And he wanted to do something. He wanted to see if it was going to be a good fit to do something closer to Kingston because that's where he was based. So he came out and met us, and I guess he liked, what he tasted and what he saw. So he commissioned us to do a test run for him to see how it would be for him to make some wine. And it was a really great project. We learned a lot, and
that's cool. That's pretty cool.
Definitely a milestone in the history of Karlo Estates. That's for sure.
In fact, other than one little brief moment, which was kind of accidental with the Cabernet Franc, that was the last time we were listed at the LCBO in 2015. Sherry was, pretty excited, thinking, okay, we're going into the LCBO. This is a really big step forward for us. And then, we're kind of looking at the inventory, and I'm thinking, Sherry, where's the inventory that didn't sell from last year? There is no unsold inventory. Everything's sold. So why would we be going in? Maybe we should put the LCBO off for a year. So then the next year we're sold out again, and we've been growing at a very nice steady rate, but sold out again. So we've now got this. I think we've settled in with pricing that shows some unique value. Let's put it that way, because we're just making wine, and our customers love the pricing of it, and they buy it up, and they kind of like the fact that they can just order online whenever they need it. And of course, now that you guys have introduced it to so many people, that's going along the same vein. It's going to be, frankly, quite a while before we're in a position, I think, to distribute through the LCBO.
And I think we're moving on into a totally different era now when we're talking about with wine sales in Canada, with the direct to consumer, and I think it's revolutionized right now the total retail aspect of the wine industry, and I think that our governments are now seeing the size of what the pandemic have created, because without the COVID pandemic, that side of the business will not have grown that fast, that quickly. I think it fast forward the whole thing at least by 10 years.
Yeah.
So now we are in a position now to approach our elected people and say, hey, we need to sign these documents as soon as possible, because now everyone is doing it. Three or four provinces have signed the free trade, but now the other province has to go forward, because it's inevitable. Like it's going to happen no matter what. So and it's really good. And what I'm the most thrilled about that is how it's about the potential of telling the real stories of you guys, what the LCBO cannot do, what a clerk inside of a retail store do not have the capacity to retain all of these information and all of the stories.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. It's about telling the stories of how you guys, like, your wines have came to birth, and why are you doing what you do. And I think people connect emotionally with that. Well, and this is a privilege to be sitting here to talk about all that with you, and like to make sure that everyone knows the story. So absolutely.
There's one point also, which is because we've been in the habit of selling direct to consumer, DTC, if you like the lingo, we have now a red wine, county grown, not only county grown, property grown. It happens to be a hybrid, but it's grown here. It's $22 a bottle for a red wine that's grown on the estate. And I challenge anybody to find wineries in the county that are able to do that. They might be bringing Niagara, grapes in and doing it at that price point, but with the lower yields in the county, that's a rare bird. And that thing would be over $30 if it was, in general listing LCBO. It would have to be.
And we're talking about the little bug here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I said I rated a good 89 points, because I thought about for a sense of place. Yeah. When you taste that, you close your eyes, you feel the minerality, you absolutely feel that bright acidity, and the length of it. To me, I felt connected with the terroir of you guys are, and these kind of wine, to me, it's traveling to Prince Edward County right off the bat, and it's such a beautiful welcome card of your portfolio. And the bubble really, really get me. Mira was an absolute biggest fan of the bubble, and again, this is a welcome to Prince Edward County type of a glass. So absolutely amazing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I have here in my glass here tonight, because to me, again, property grown. That was important for me tonight to have a bottle of wine property grown. It means a lot. 100% of the fruit are coming from the estate here. It's the Gemini. How about you guys are taking me through how this blend came out, and the idea of blending these grapes together and to come up with that bottle of wine. I know it's a very small production. I think we're talking about maybe 100 cases or something.
2 barrels.
Barrels. So 50 cases.
600 bottles.
That's nuts. Wow, this is really unique, and I'm in love with what I'm having in my glass right now. Sherry, please tell us about what's in there. Carmenere, Cabernet Franc, am I correct?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. We encourage the guys to continue with their love of experimentation. The problem with Karlo is Richard left a couple artists in charge. So when you put artists with winemakers, we're all artists, so we just want to play. And so we have kind of a small lot program at Karlo where the guys can play with Richard's amateur winemaking equipment and use demijohns and like carboys and like do a lot of really crazy stuff. So we have a series, when you talk about the reason why Karlo Estates was formed, like we know about the history, but the reason was because Richard was a big Bordeaux wine lover. And he wanted to prove that the county could make, and Canada could make wines that would rival any throughout the world, but maybe for, a little less money. So because the limestone and the latitude and the relevance to Burgundy and Bordeaux, he believed that Ontario could make a beautiful 6 Bordeaux grape varietal blend, and he named it Sextus, meaning sixth in Latin, because it was all 6 of the original Bordeaux grape varietals. So Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Carmenere. That was his goal. That was he was trying to do, and we achieved his dream
Posthumously.
Posthumous,
yeah.
yes.
Posthumous.
In 2018, and actually released it in 2020, in around the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And so what we do to make the Sextus is we only make it in the very best years. So far, we've only made it once, but we've talked about it as a team, and we only want to do it when it's the best fruit, because it's very hard to get all 6 of the grape varietals. First of all, it's very hard to get them, A, and B, it's very hard to get them all firing on all cylinders all at the same time and making a really exceptional wine. So what we do is we make them all as individual wines, and then the guys do bench trials and figure out exactly that perfect ratio. And then they blend the Sextus. So in this particular vintage, we only got 2 barrels because you only have so much of each component, and then you run out of one. So then we would make what we call Quintus, which is 5 of the 6 grape varietals because one has run out. So in the past, it's been Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot, minus the Carmenere. We have the only Carmenere in Eastern Canada, and that's because Richard knew that it had been found in Chile and repropagated up through the United States in the 90s. There's some Carmenere in BC where you are, but we were the first to have it in Eastern Canada. So he did that because he knew it would be so hard to get it in Ontario. He had to plant it himself. And then we also have, as Saxe mentioned, those 2 acres of Malbec. And that, again, is because there is Malbec throughout Ontario, but we are the only ones to have it in the county. And we planted it ourselves because he didn't want to have to be fighting other winemakers to get that fruit from a vineyard, right? So then we make, we haven't made a Quattro or anything yet, but usually after the Quintus, we go down to Triumvirate, which is a wine that actually Saxe named. It is an ancient Roman term that refers to 3 emperors ruling together for balanced government. And in this particular vintage, it was Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. It's been different components of the Bordeaux grape varietals at different times. And then because sometimes the guys are blending stuff together because they're trying to get that perfect ratio, and they're like, okay, we're going to put these wines together and we're going to put that one over there, and that's going to be for the Sextus, and this is going to be for the Triumvirate, and so that sort of thing. And they were topping up barrels and saying, okay, well, these 2 are going to get blended anyway together, so we're just going to put this Carmenere into this Cab Franc because we're going to use it in the Sextus later, so that's fine. But then they tasted it, and they were like,
wow.
Whoa, I got something here.
Yeah, so they said, you know what, let's just hold back 2 barrels. And we just did it as a fun small lot project, and wow, has it ever been successful.
Wow.
We're now talking to the guys. We're like, That sold really fast. Can we make more of that again next year? So we're working on it. We're hoping to get more than 2 barrels, but it's all up to what happens. Like Richard used to say, making wine is kind of like playing cards. You have to deal with the hand the vintage presents and make the best wine that you possibly can.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We don't know right now exactly what's going to happen with this vintage. The guys will decide, because Derek's the master at blending, and they will say, this wine has more of this and this wine has more of that. And they're going to use each wine to like fill in the holes of the next and create the smoothest, longest taste profile possible. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that we're trying to get to Sextus. But, we do Quintus. Our next vintage of Quintus is being released for Christmas, because we love to say you can have Quintus for Christmas. But one of the wines that we have a lot of right now that we're really enjoying is the Triumvirate. Do you want to grab the Triumvirate?
Yeah.
What's really fantastic about this wine is it's a great demonstration of an old world wine. You know how that notion of like, why do we have all these decanters all the time? What's the point of a decanter? And, it's not just for wine snobs anymore. A decanter it has a real purpose. And the purpose is to get oxygen into the wine. Because,
that's a slow
patient.
one.
We should watch what we're doing,
It's a slow one.
Anyway, it's filtering. See, it's spitting.
It's very slowly.
Spitting. Oops.
Yeah.
On the computer. Anyway, wine is a lot like garlic. The more surface area you expose to oxygen, the more taste profile you're going to get out of that wine. So the great thing about decanting is it exposes more surface area to oxygen. So we're using a decanter because this is a very old world style of wine. The guys like to experiment with like doing wild ferments or spontaneous fermentations. Sometimes they'll pitch commercial yeast at the end to finish it off or not. But because of that, you're just having one yeast. You're having like 2,000 different kinds of yeast. Yeah. So sometimes there's like, just like people, there's good yeasts and there's bad yeasts. And sometimes as a wine is aging, it lets off different aromas, and it's really a living organism because it's always constantly changing. So because this is like very much an old world wine, decanting it helps. There's this descriptor that, maybe doesn't sound so interesting, but the descriptor that we've referred to as barnyard, it's truly a characteristic of an old world wine. But this is a wine that loves to be decanted because if you decant it, that barnyard blows off and you have a really beautiful a plum fruit.
Yeah, that was a little bit like more skewed fruit, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And actually, I really loved I've been using your story that you told me about the first time you tried the Triumvirate in the tasting room.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for that.
That's true.
I feel honored here.
You tried it one night, you rated it, and then what happened?
The night after, the day after, I'm like, whoa. This is way better than what I tasted last night. Yeah. And sometimes we are guilty as being in the rush, and you pop and pour, you swirl, you taste, you put it down. And now, it serves me as a lesson, because what I've done now, I never taste the wine only once. I always give it a try the day after, because I do not want to get caught up by exactly what happened that time. And I'm using that more and more now.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
The Enovino.
Easy.
Yeah, the Enovino. And now like it's the perfect pour. Like it decants the wine one glass at a time. So
yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, all wine benefits from decanting except for sparkling, because you lose your bubbles. But even white wine is
absolutely
a benefit. Like wine is kind of that genie in a bottle. It needs a chance to breathe and like get herself together and relax, so she can warm up, relax, show off that beautiful
it's
beautiful
like
legs.
A massage. It's like a nice shoulder massage.
Yeah.
I know. Like
Good analogy, but
no, absolutely, guys. I like that Triumvirate myself, and I give it a nice score. So what we're gonna do? It's tonight. What I want to do for over the weekend, I want to send to all of our members a couple little clip of our story tonight, and tell our people that the offer that what we sent a couple months ago is reopened. Obviously, minus the bubbles, the Quintus. But Mira already modified the list through the email that you guys have been back and forth, and we would like to offer our member to reorder any of your wines if either people skip the offer or already purchased and would like to get more. So we're going to do that tomorrow morning as a Friday morning email. That's what we're going to do. And I would also like to ask you one question. I like to do that little question before we go. It's if you have to use one other label in the world, okay, any wine produced in the world, if you say for one day you can change the Karlo estate just to put another label, which one would it be?
Can I have his answer and my answer? How do I pick just one?
Again, by the way, I don't say to choose Karlo, but it's just for fun, like internationally, which other wine would you like to be for one day?
1870 Chateau Mouton Rothschild.
Jesus, Mary, why do you have to say that? Oh my God!
Or maybe I might go for a 1975 Palmer, Chateau Palmer as well.
I had the chance to have dinner at the Banff Spring Hotel with James Seychelles, just him and I, after we did the 1969 tasting.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that's the top experience in my wine life, that's for sure.
Wow.
But Palmer, yes, Palmer. Sherry, what would be yours?
Now I can't. I'm having a moment. I'm having a senior moment. I'm like, what's the Raven? Is it Ravencroft? Raven. Come on.
Ravenswood.
Is it Ravenswood?
Ravenswood? Is that what you think?
From California? Isn't like famous for your Zinfandel?
Maybe the old vines in.
Yeah, you know what it is? I'm such an art director, graphic designer person. It's because I love that Celtic knot. I've actually had people say to me that the three crows going around in a circle kind of looks like our wine labels. And I'm like,
that's true.
It looks like it would fit into our portfolio. I love that aesthetic because I love all that Celtic mythology and Celtic knots and tattoos.
But you probably like, what Baron Philippe used to do as well, because he'd have these famous painters.
That was the other one I was thinking of.
Well, that's Chateau Mouton Rothschild.
Yes, that's one when you said it. I was like, that's my answer number two.
With Mouton Rothschild, there's one of the year was, I think it was a Quebec artist from yeah, it had one of the Chateau Mouton Rothschild is one of the artists from Quebec who had one, I think, in the 70s. So
70s, cool. Wow, cool.
Yeah, what a great concept. I mean,
it's absolutely fantastic. And for me, I would say, guys, I think I will probably go with the 66 Grand Échezeaux, just to tell people that's the first wine I tasted in my life was a 66 Échezeaux. For God's sake.
Well, it wasn't the first one I tasted. It was the first one I liked.
Yeah, that's true. No, yeah, we talk about the Black Tower. True.
Now that I know that they chemically arrest the fermentation to keep the sugar high in those wines, now I know why I was getting those headaches. It had nothing to do with tannins. It's nothing to do with sulfites. It was there were chemicals in the that sort of brings us to the vegan thing and why Sherry was the first vegan certified winery in the world. Now there are lots, but what's in our bottle is grapes.
So we created the first vegan wine in the world, and everything because of that, everything at the winery is vegan. We're as vegan as it gets, because we want our collars to match our cuffs. Yeah.
Guys, you're so generous of your time. I would like to keep going for another hour, but I know that you guys have so much to do. But thank you so much. First and foremost, for sharing this story with us. To spend the last hour with me just means the world to me, because I just love chatting like that. It's just so warming. Like I feel like there's a nice fireplace and we're just sitting down, like foot up and just chatting. It's just too cool. We really, really like to thank you. For myself and Mira, we greatly appreciate your partnership. And I want to wish you a great rest of your week, a good weekend. And thanks again for being part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karl.
Thanks for having us. It's a great honor.
Thanks a million. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers.
Night.
Thank you very much. We'll chat soon. Thank you. Cheers.